And we are live. Nice. Excellent connection. Stream health looks good. Cool, cool. Okay, so different streaming day, different hours to begin. So today we're gonna try out this 10 a.m. Live stream brewing and see what happens. It seems like a much better time frame for most people according to my Google or YouTube analytics, and hopefully it will be good. Morning, how's it going? Yeah, and I'm actually really excited to start off this new bag of coffee because it's a dark roast. These are the beans over here, and we're gonna use the Osmotic flow with the Hario V60. And I was doing some research on it because I've done it in the past, and I've realized that I've been doing it pretty wrong. And it's because I've been following a lot of the, I guess, Western YouTubers that have made tutorials on the Osmotic flow, which is a pour over technique. And I just realized that something was wrong after going to the true source of the technique, which is Kafek in Japan, and seeing how they did it and how they explained it. So I'm gonna do my best and show it to you today from what I've learned, and I'll for sure make a tutorial on it down the road, which will be pretty exciting because I don't think anyone in the Western coffee content sphere has like really made a good tutorial on the Osmotic flow brewing technique. So just a bit about these beans over here. My sister gave them to me. It was when she was over at PEI in Canada, Prince Edward Island. And the really cute thing about this is that all of these stickers are placed on the bag by the roaster's grandma. So the grandma is there like putting all of these stickers on the bag, and it's just super cute to know that someone's grandma has put on all of these coffee stickers on this bag over here. Super cute. Okay, so let's open up the beans. And take a peek at them. Camera falling to the side. Great. There we go. So, looking at the beans over here, I can tell that they are a darker roast just by looking at them because they have a shine. So they're a bit more oily than lighter roast beans. And also, yet again, the color is much darker too. So two things that you can be on the lookout for a dark roast is that if it has a shine, it has more oils on it, which is a indication of a dark roast. And also the color itself. They look very evenly roasted, which is great. And I'm excited to brew with these. So I'm also gonna purge my grinder, and I made a video in the past, but I'm using minute rice to purge my grinder because it's as good as any other grinder cleaning device and product out there after doing my research. So let me show you how I do that. Morning, hello. So what I do when I clean my grinder between beans, I just take a small cup of minute rice, around this much, and just the biggest thing to take note of is that minute rice is super brittle. So I can crush it with my finger over here extremely easy, like so. And this is the big difference between minute rice and regular rice. This is just extremely brittle to the touch. And then I take this, I toss it into my grinder, grind it all out. Like so. And now I've purged the grinder and it's ready for the new beans. So I take this and I just toss it out. And I also like to take a small handful of the new beans and toss them in to prepare it. So that is how I prepare the grinder for a new bag of beans. Like so. So the grinder is fully purged from our beans that we used prior to this bag, and we are ready to measure out. So the recipe that we'll be using today for the osmotic flow is this over here. So we got a 1:16 ratio, which means 15 grams of coffee equals 240 grams of water. I'll be using a slightly lower water temperature than normal, so not boiling, but 95 degrees Celsius. And we'll be using a much higher grind size than what we used for our light roast. So this is 37 instead of like a 29 that we used. And I'll show you how that looks like in the video. But this will be our starting point, and we'll see what we need to tweak and change as we taste our coffee. So let's first change our grinder to the settings. We'll need 37 as a grind setting. And it's really just an arbitrary setting where I make an estimation as to how coarse I need the grinds to be. It's not, it needs to be exactly this number. It's more like, yeah, around here. Let's measure our coffee, 15 grams. Like so. Here we got the beans. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions or anything, just feel free to ask those in the chat. I'm pretty good at just quoting questions or thoughts or comments as I brew. And I always love the interaction. It's fun. So, really does smell like a dark roast. Has a lot of toasty notes to it. It's like the classic dark roast sense that I'm getting from this bean over here. And here's how the grinds look. I'm gonna show it to you with the brewer, this guy over here. So I'll move this down, put some on my hand, like so. And then use the brewer to just see where the majority of the grinds go through. So I would say my grind size is around this over here. So it's around 900 microns to like 1,300 microns right here. That is my 37 grind setting. so. And that is still 15 grams, which is awesome. So I'm gonna explain quickly what the osmotic flow technique will be. So I'll be pouring really slowly. I'll be pouring in the center, and you'll see a lot of bubbles occurring. And what will happen is that it'll be this nice big fluffy bloom of coffee. And what I'm doing is that I'm first pouring for a bloom. So I'm adding around 50 grams of water for a bloom, let it degas. And then I'm pouring around 1/3 of the water amount of the total weight in really slowly. And after that, I'm doing something where I'm pouring the water on the side where the bubbles and the crust meet. It doesn't make a lot of sense when I'm talking about it right now, but it'll make way more sense when I show it to you in this brewing session over here. So let's get really nice and close into the brewer, and I'll show you how I'll do it. Like so. And I'll be using a fabric filter for this, lowering the rim like so. And let's get our water. So I'm gonna preheat everything, like so. And I'll also be using a towel to pour a bit differently, because this technique really relies on a super slow pour from the spout. And if I pour just straight from the top, the flow is pretty intense. But if I twist it a bit and I pour even slower like this, you can see that it's a bit more controlled and straight down. So I like using a towel and kind of like tilting the kettle slightly. And that is just to have a more controlled pour from the spout and kettle. So just to write it down for myself, I'm doing a 50-gram bloom. And then I'm waiting around 30 seconds, and then I need to pour around 1/3 of the remaining amount. So that is around 80 grams. 80 grams of water. So these two equals 130. So I need to pour up to 130 just in the center. And then I pour all the way up to 240 grams. Let me show you what I mean. So we tare. We pour in our coffee like so. And I'm not going to stir the bloom here. From what I've seen, most people who use the osmotic flow technique do not stir the bloom. And let's begin. Or actually, let's wait for the water temperature to lower a bit, like so. And one thing that I realized in my research is that the osmotic flow technique uses a filter that is a bit thicker than the regular filters. So these over here are the normal Hario V60 filters, and they're pretty thin. But from what I read, the Cafec osmotic flow filters are a bit thicker, which restricts flow a bit more. So it's more of a better representation to use a thicker fabric filter than the thin paper filters. Don't worry, all these things will be in the future guide that I make, but it's just good to explain it for myself so even I know, you know. So let's begin the pour. We're pouring 50 grams. From the center, just going in a nice circle around, like so. And that is 50 grams right there. You can see it degassing and bubbling. And now we're gonna wait to the 30-second mark, and then we're gonna pour all the way up to 130 grams from the center. like this. And if these bubbles in the center start overflowing, just stop. You don't want to over pour here. But you do want to let it degas and let the gas escape. Like so. And as you can see, it's forming a nice crust. And you can see a definition between the bubbles and the crust. So now that I've hit 130, I'm going to go around the sides where the bubbles and crust meet. And I'm just going to slowly pour until I hit my watermark, which is 240 grams. If I see that it's going too far up, like ballooning and getting flat, I need to stop pouring because I know that the liquid is too high. So just take a small pause. And already I can tell that my technique is kind of sloppy because the bed is somewhat flat right now. Ideally, you still want that nice thick crust on the sides. So I can tell that this attempt over here is like subpar. But it's still, I'll probably create a good cup of coffee still, you know? Like so. That's 240 grams. So next time that I pour, I would probably try to slow it down even more, my pour, so that the water level doesn't increase that quickly up over here. Because I saw that the bed was getting pretty flat, but you still want that nice dome-shaped crust when you're doing the osmotic flow technique. And there's a lot of science that is going in over here because there's something called a membrane in the osmotic flow where there's this divide between the concentrated coffee and water that I was reading about, and it's pretty fascinating and it's really hard to explain in one sentence, but it allows it so that you don't grab all the fines in the coffee and extract those. So you kind of like limit the extraction of some particles. And from what I read, this crust should be as thick as possible. So you want this to be really chunky and big with the osmotic flow. And what I'm going to probably do is change my grind size too, because it seems like this grind size is still a bit too fine for this technique. According to what I saw online, the grind size needs to be way thicker and chunkier than this. So probably increase that to like 42, 43. But overall, it looks good. Like these bubbles are supposed to be there, and this crust is supposed to be here, and that is kind of like the osmotic flow. Still need to tweak it a bit and really hone it in, but it's really fascinating, and I'm learning. Learning. Okay, so let's just look a bit closer at this bed. Yeah, so I got the bubbles forming, the foam bubbles that are supposed to be there. And yet again, this crust is a bit too high. I wish it was a bit lower. So hopefully the grind size change that I'll probably do will tweak that. But what really matters is the cup of coffee. So I haven't even tasted it yet. Maybe this is a amazingly delicious cup of coffee. Who knows? Give that a stir. And let's just take a peek at it. Nice and clear. Lovely color. Looks delish. And One thing to say here is that I've never brewed with the osmotic flow with this type of scrutiny before. Before, I just thought that it was pouring in the center and pouring slow. But after doing a lot of research and like this weekend over here, I realized that there's a lot of science behind the osmotic flow technique, the way that I brewed right now, that is kind of like vital for the brewing method. So you need a dark roast because of the flow rate. You want a thicker filter because you want the water to not go through the brewer as quickly as the thinner filters. You need to pour extremely slow and in specific areas. And there are different segments in the pour that you need to worry about, which is really fascinating. So hopefully I get to hone in on my technique of the osmotic flow with these live streams and really get to a point where I can explain it even better and make a good tutorial on it. But let's give this a taste and see what's up. So I can tell that it's very over extracted. So right away, my tongue got really raspy. It had those bitter notes, and I can tell that there is not a lot of coffee shining through here. So we kind of need to do a big change to counteract that. And as I was observing, as I was doing the brew time was pretty long. So it was like 330, 340 minutes, and the grind size is pretty fine. So I need to like tweak the grind size for sure to change this. So David says, I do a higher dose and lower temp. Also with a Kono, which is a smaller dripper and has a slower flow rate. Interesting, yeah. So I kind of need to compensate for that too. So I'm using the version 2 instead of the version 1 Hario V60 instead of the version 2, just so that I can get even closer to the coffee bed when I'm doing my pour. And I think all of these things really matter with the osmotic flow method. It's something that like you need a lot of equipment to just get it right, because there's so many small things and bits and bobs that you need to finick about. So yeah, I think you're on the ball. I need to slow my flow rate, and I need to just try to pour as slow as possible. But overall, like the technique itself is awesome. This cup is for sure over extracted, but I'll take a sip again and just see what's up. Yeah, like there aren't a lot of redeeming features over here. Usually with the dark roast, I want like a rich, clean, crisp body. This one doesn't have it right now, and it's because I've over extracted the beans. And I think that there's a lot of potential that I can still get out of these beans if I tweak my recipe a bit. So looking at our recipe. Hello. Yeah, having a specific dripper for this method, I actually, oh, kettle. I saw that kettle, actually. So David is talking about a specific kettle for the osmotic flow method, and from what I saw, it's a kettle that has a spout that like goes a bit downwards and tapers, so that when you're pouring, the liquid goes straight down. And that's instead of me trying to compensate for like the pouring technique where I'm like tilting it a bit and trying to get a really slow pour. So the kettle that David is talking about in chat is a kettle that is meant for the osmotic flow technique that kind of drips straight down. Back to the recipe, let's see what it tasted like. So it was pretty over extracted, so this is balanced, under extracted, over extracted. I would say this is actually one of the most over extracted cups I've had in a long time. Taste wise, it's pretty shitty. Sadly enough, the over extracted qualities are totally overshadowing the cup. I would probably drink it at a diner, but even in a diner, it's not up to diner quality. So this cup of coffee has a long way to go. And what would I do? So the grind or the change that I would make for sure is grind size. I would change grind size and do a massive change. So let's do it to like 45. So going from 37 to 45 on our grinder, and we'll see how that goes. And we'll keep everything else the same. So we'll keep the 95 degrees Celsius, we'll keep the 1 to 16 brewing ratio, and see how that goes tomorrow. But overall, I think that this method of brewing, the osmotic flow, is just underrepresented in the pour over community, and I feel like we really need to learn something about it here in the Western world, because in Japan they have obviously excelled with it and done really awesome things with the osmotic flow brewing method combined with dark roasts. So to bring that magic over to the Western world and kind of like share the spotlight with the light roasts and quick extractions, I think that it would be a great benefit for everyone to learn what a good dark roast tastes like. So that will pretty much be my goal of this series over here, to make a really good dark roast work. And I know this is a pretty good dark roast, so we'll hopefully get a really good cup of coffee with the osmotic flow, and with the knowledge that I gain, make a guide out of it. So I'm gonna for sure mention like the kettles and specific pour overs for the osmotic flow, because I do know that there are some unique equipment pieces that you can get that are specific to this brewing method. But it's not mandatory, it just makes it a bit easier to do. Yeah, each time I take a sip, I just want to like clench my mouth with some water. That's how drying and like, yeah, it is. Anyways, thanks for joining. I think there was a way better turnout at this time frame compared to the other time frame that I did at 1 p.m. So I'm gonna continue my live streams at 10 a.m. moving forwards, and we'll see what's up and how things go. Hopefully you guys saw my new video that I posted yesterday on controlling brew time with a pour over. I think that that's a really stellar video for anyone who is interested in upping their game in the pour over world, because it gives a lot of insight as to how you can control pour over brew time and why it should be something you should nitpick on. And yeah, check out that video if you haven't seen it, and I'll see you tomorrow, maybe. Take care. Have a good day, everyone. And stream.